Assalamu alaikum to all of our Halal Talks listeners. This is your host, Arham, and you are listening to episode number 8 with Hina and Zeeshan Mukhtar, where we discussed their evolution as a couple, how they have grown over the years, and how they have been able to strengthen each other's faith. So let's dive right into it.
You are now listening to Halal Talks.
Going back to your story, because Uncle Zeeshan was mentioning that when he came to meet you, he noticed that you were part of a integrated community. Did that community foster religious knowledge and religious zeal for you?
Unfortunately, no. The community didn't. What the community gave me was love and acceptance and a lot of good memories, and they felt like extended family at a time when I didn't really have cousins in Southern California. If anything, actually, my community in Southern California has been like, what happened up north? Like, how did you guys change so much? You know, what made you guys, quote unquote, religious? What fostered religious zeal, if we can call it that, is really the teachers, having the right teachers, and having a brother who was always very passionate about this topic and was always searching. And I always tell this story about my brother that, you know, we had friends from other faith communities. We grew up with a lot of, I don't like to use the term non-Muslim, but just as a shortcut, a lot of non-Muslim friends. And I remember this story from when he was in third grade where he had to do his prayer. And so he went off in a room and he was in ruku doing his prayer, and his friend's brother walked in, and his name was like Peter or something. And he's like, what are you looking for? And he bent down next to him, searching for whatever he was looking for in the carpet, and then realized he was trying to pray. So I always tell that story. That's so funny that the kid thought he was searching for something in the carpet. But now I realize what was actually amazing was that he was in the third grade and he wasn't missing his prayer. You know, he was at a person who wasn't Muslim. He was at their house and he wasn't missing his prayer, you know. So mashallah, he always had that passion. So he was always seeking, he was always trying to find teachers. And he tried to bring us along on that journey with him. And so, alhamdulillah, I think it was the prayers of our grandparents and finding the right teachers at the right time that brought out that passion. It was always there, and like Zeeshan mentioned, Dr. Sucker was one of the first people to really kind of light a fire under us in the 80s in Southern California.
Yeah, and then going back to the immigrant struggle with our parents building mosques and stuff like that, you know, we need to acknowledge the African-American influence on Islam.
Yeah.
I mean, they were really here before us. And when you think about like Malcolm X, when you think about the Nation of Islam, I mean, I didn't really think about it until I started going to classes in Talif, and Osama Cannon brought those things to light. And I'm like, yeah, well, we didn't have a struggle. My parents didn't struggle with their community building a mosque because Muslims were already here. It wasn't like we weren't the first ones.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of bring that point to light as well, based on what we talked about before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we always kind of just feel like that first generation because we're still evolving as a community. I think even the next generation is still going to feel like they have so much work to do, and they have that feeling of first generation. And me and Adam always talk about that the Muslim community almost feels like the startup, right? And there's so many different avenues that people can add value to that are now emerging, and it's so amazing to see. But one thing I wanted to kind of go back to is you were talking about you were feeling lonely, Uncle Zeeshan. And that kind of thought, that thought brought to me is, how did you two kind of evolve as a couple? Because you were saying, Uncle Zeeshan, that you didn't grow up in that kind of Muslim environment. So how did you two come together to kind of foster that Muslim household?
We got lucky because I've seen it not work for a lot of couples. And for a while, it looked like it might go that route for us as well, because I definitely started feeling a need for a change, a need for growth, a need to do more and learn more. Whereas Zeeshan was pretty comfortable. He was like, hey, you know, we're praying. Isn't that good enough?
Yeah, from where I was at, hey. I was, you know, paving some steps to Jannah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
But that was completely wrong.
So Yeah, when we first started out, he was pretty resistant, and it's funny. I found some old letters when we first were talking about getting married. One of the questions I asked him, and it's really funny because I sound so self-righteous when I myself wasn't even that religious, but I'm just like, what role does Islam play in your life? And he's like, not a very big one, but I'm looking for those influences again, and so I'm fine like bringing that into my life again. And I was like, well, Islam's very important to me, and even though I wasn't really an example of what a good Muslim should look like. So, but I made it clear to him that was important to me. But then didn't really do much with that after we got married. And the spiritual awakening for me was really when I had my first son, when I had Sean, because then it was this, oh my God moment. I've got this soul that I have to raise in this world, and I have to help him, want to be Muslim, and we have to figure out how we're going to do this. And when I told Zeeshan I wanted to start taking classes with Sheikh Hamza, he at the time wasn't interested.
Sean
because
was a few months old.
Yeah. And then, and it, to be fair, it was not easy. It was like a 45-minute drive to this class, and it meant figuring out having a babysitter. And, so I started taking the classes without him, and that started like opening up this whole new world to me and a whole new awareness. And I came back from it telling him I wanted to wear hijab at one point. And he was like, absolutely not. He's like, if I wanted to marry a muhajjaba, I would have married a muhajjaba. I did not sign up for this. He was.
Hey, remember, I'm the one who didn't want the Christmas tree.
Yeah. So then the compromise was, I said, okay, fine. I won't wear hijab, but then you have to agree to take these classes with me. And so he was like, that's fine. I'll agree to classes. I'll just never agree to hijab. I was like, okay. So I got, he used to stay home and watch football while I would go to these classes. So then he started taking these classes with me. And a year later, I brought it up again, telling him that I felt I was really ready for that step. And at that point, I decided I was going to wear it regardless, whether he quote unquote approved or not. And I told him, I'm gonna wear the hijab, and I'm just letting you know I'm not asking for your permission. But I
Showdown in the desert.
Yeah, and I said, if you support me, I would love that. But if you don't, I'm still moving ahead. So he said at the time that, well, I thought that we had agreed we would take classes together, and that was the compromise. And I said, yeah, but I feel like I'm ready for something next level. So he thought about it. I still remember we were sitting on the Janamaz. I had just prayed Isha when I broke the news to him. And he said, okay, fine, I won't stop you. And then I was like, why not? Because I I had to push back a little and figure this out. And he wouldn't answer. And I kept saying, no, I want to know, why aren't you as resistant as you were the first time? And he said, I want us to keep moving forward, which really thrilled me because he wasn't seeing it as a step backwards, which is how he used to see it. So the fact that he saw it as a step forward meant a lot to me. And I remember after a couple of days, I was already struggling with the hijab and kind of regretting my decision and wishing I hadn't taken it on and wishing I hadn't told people I was going to wear the hijab because there was no backing out now. And I was grumbling about it to him. And he just listened quietly. He did not, to his credit, he did not say, even though I know he still felt this way, he didn't say, okay, fine, take it off. You just take it off. It's not a big deal. He just stayed quiet and let me go through my emotions. And then one day we were going out to dinner, and I still remember I was wearing a cream-colored hijab, and he told me I looked pretty. And he said, I think you look really nice in the hijab, and I don't want you to take it off. And that really meant a lot to me because even though I thought I could do it alone, every young wife wants to be attractive to her husband. So it meant a lot to me to know that he still found me pretty.
It wasn't just the resistance to being the religiosity of it. It was also fear. There's also this thing like, now you're representing Islam on your person. That was also a concern from a man who's a caretaker. so it's like, okay, you're gonna, be out there. And it was a big concern, when 9/11 happened, definitely, because now it's like, yeah, sure, I can go to work and be, Aussie instead of Osmont. And she didn't have that luxury anymore, no matter what she can say. And the other thing is, I think the tipping point for me is very clear, and Hina mentioned it as well, is like, when Sean was born and he was handed to me, it was like, okay, the BS games in your brain are over. You cannot pretend like you're some kid anymore. You are now an adult, and you have somebody to take care of. I mean, that was like a very, very blessed but very scary moment. And mashallah, you're expecting your first child, so you'll go through that miracle as well. It was just, I remember that moment. I remember exactly where I was standing, and I remember when they wrapped him up and handed him to me. I was like, oh boy, what is going on now? It just changes your whole landscape and trajectory of your whole rest of your life. And Sean, being the firstborn, always has that credit, right? Amin and Rahim are very special as well. But the second one was also going to Sheikh Hamza's classes and just feeling like listening to him was, I don't know.
It was eye-opening, yeah.
Getting emotional, but just shame. Like, I felt like, is his religion my religion? This is not the same religion. And I felt shame. And then I remember, as I was feeling shame, he talked about dead hearts. And he talked about the more you don't remember Allah and spend your life sinning and spend your life in heedlessness. And these are all concepts that I was learning, like, what's the state of a human being? What's the state of your heart? I mean, I think you guys are young because you've grown up with that kind of vocabulary around religion, but I had never heard anything.
Yeah,
like
we'd
that.
only heard halal and haram.
Yeah,
we hadn't really heard about purification of the heart.
To hear someone who was, a Greek Orthodox convert who went to Mauritania, came back, and he was talking about this stuff, I felt like, okay, I'm proud of this religion. I'm proud of how sophisticated and erudite and well thought out this religion is, and how
merciful.
when he spoke, I remember also distinctly him talking about the dead heart, and he said that you have to polish this heart. And then I remember him mentioning the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he choked up, and he started crying just at the mention of him. And I was like, wow. There is night and day difference between him and I felt ashamed. So that's probably what changed me the most. And I remember it was this little room in Hayward, and I was sitting there taking notes, and I remember just these concepts coming my way, and it was just a really mind-blowing thing. And that was the first time I had ever gone to a khutbah or a talk or anything where it was like, I felt moved. So how many thousands of khutbahs had I heard? Mashallah, all those people were probably very well learned, but I remember going, this is what the American teenager needs to hear. This is the kind of person that needs to talk to them. Not someone from back east. Mashallah, they have a lot of knowledge, but speaking about what we need to hear. That was the first time, really. And then, mashallah, there's a lot of amazing scholars since then that I've been exposed to, but he was the first one. So those two things, Sean and Sheikh Hamza, were really defining moments in our lives. For me as well. I mean,
and back to your question about like how does a couple grow together in the religion, I think number one, it has to be dua. You have to do a lot of prayer for it because it's really easy to grow in different directions. And I've seen it happen to a lot of people. And then the second is making at least a conscious effort to learn together. Because if we had continued on that track, which happens for a lot of people, where I'm going to the classes and learning about the religion and he's staying home and watching football, then it's really easy to be living like double lives, in the home. And it's very, very confusing for the children, especially when the father's not on board with the religion, or the practice of it. Yeah,
I think the gentleness of it is very important because it's, I think, one of one of the things that's going to happen is you're two people on two trajectories that are sharing a life, but you're still two individuals. And so if she had gone her way and been harsh about it and said, oh, you know, what is this football? You know, you should be doing X, Y, Z. I'm better than you. You know, that kind of tone, it probably would have just pushed me around. Okay, fine. You know, I'm going to watch more football. You know, I'm going to order a Jerry Rice jersey now, you know, but she did it with gentleness. She said, you know, let's do it a little bit. I want you over here with me. And so when you call people with the sunnah, mashallah, of love and concern, and you do it in a gentle way, sort of like the story of Hazrat Ibrahim and his father, you know, then I think it works. And that's very, very, you have to be very, very careful of that. If you don't do it that way, then people are just, the nafs is such a way, it's like you're just drawing a line in the sand that I'm going to cross, you know, and you're begging another person to maybe go the wrong way because of the nafs. So we were very lucky, and I think one of the things couples need to learn together is to really be gentle, really, really be gentle, and always, if you're diverging from each other and you have this and he has that, that's not a good formula. It's only going to go farther away. The children, the time, what you need to do, work versus school, it's all going to split the time. And your children experience that as well, because they're going to get caught in this 2-track system in your house. And then they're not going to know who to respect.